Ready for your weekly tech fix? Want to know how technology sets us free? Well, get ready because here it comes. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, entrepreneur and technophile Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now, here's Brian.
Here I am, the golden stallion of the tech world, the Rembrandt of the podcast canvas, ready for another wonderful episode of Sovryn Tech. It is Brian Sovryn with you, of course, as the lovely and hyper-intelligent producer of the show, Stephanie Murphy, just said. Just got back from, well, you might have heard the special that came out just before this episode came out. Just got back from Terracoin Conference 2013 in San Jose, and there was a lot of Terracoin action to be had there. Very, very exciting. So if you want some of mine and Dr. Stephanie Murphy's impressions and reactions to Terracoin Conference 2013, you can actually find the episode at the SoundCloud page, soundcloud.com/SovrynTech, or at SovrynTech.com. It's there as well. And, it was a good conversation, a little over an hour, and we covered a lot of topics and talked, even more than just about Terracoin Conference 2013. Of course, I'm talking about Bitcoin Conference 2013, but I'm very, very excited about Terracoin, so I like to give Terracoin a little bit of love. Of course, I'm also excited about Litecoin, so I give that as much love as I can too. Just a reminder real quick that if you want to see the Golden Stallion doing his thing kind of live, I will be moderating a talk in I believe it's in November, at Keenvention in Keene, New Hampshire, a town that I once called home. And that's in November. You can go to keenvention.info or look it up on Facebook. That's KEENE vention.info, and you can look into that. And the tickets are pretty inexpensive from what I understand, and they're at an early bird special right now. And if you haven't looked into that, please do check it out. And again, I will be there, so it should be a great time. As far as any other announcements, I can't really think of any. Later on in the show, we are going to talk about one of the big events in the tech world that happened recently, which was WgrIo 2013. We will be discussing that. It went for pick of the week. So keep listening to the episode if you want to kind of hear my impressions about that. Let's get right into the first story of the week, and this is from a kind of a weird website, but it's such an intriguing article. It's from filmsforaction.org. And, I guess it's actually from Yes Magazine. Now that makes sense, because I was wondering, well, why the heck is this story? It's like, this website's just totally odd, but it is from a genuine magazine, and it's some genuine journalism. And it's Survival of the Nicest. A new theory of our origins says cooperation, not competition, is instinctive. So this is, of course, Sovryn Tech, the show about science and technology and how it can set you free. And I think this is pretty interesting. This definitely falls under the science header. And we've talked a few times about, I'm very, very interested in Paleolithic matters. I'm actually interested in, the paleo lifestyle. I've talked about that before, or the paleo diet, all of the above. But I'm also interested in Paleolithic times because, okay, fine. So, I'm into the paleo diet because that's how humans ate, and it's pretty much the best way how to, be healthy would be to eat at least under the rules that exist, for it, like no gluten, and low carb, things like that. So it's best to stick within that to be at your healthiest, which is what I absolutely want to be at my healthiest, because I need to live long enough for transhumanist technologies to exist, which is something we will be talking about. We may even do a whole special on what are called life extension technologies, or LETs. And I will be doing that. I've had requests to talk about that, and I will do so. But anyway, so I'm interested in the Paleolithic matters for that aspect. I'm also interested, in what exactly, not just diet, but how did they operate? What was kind of their exercise regimen, if they even had one? And also the other interesting thing, and I listened to, there's this great podcast out there, if you haven't heard it. It's called Complete Liberty, and it's by Wes Bertrand, great guy, and an incredibly enjoyable podcast in that, it is just solid liberty. It's complete liberty, and it literally is. It covers, almost any aspect you can imagine. And there was a podcast a little while back where he talked about how that it wasn't until farming and the Neolithic age that people, that there was allowed to be a state, a government, a control, that control was able to be put upon pan sapiens. And so that's another reason that the Paleolithic era interests me, is the philosophy of Paleolithic people. And that's what this article is about. So let's break right into it. A century ago, industrialists like Andrew Carnegie believed that Darwin's theories justified an economy of vicious competition and inequality. They left us with an ideological legacy that says the corporate economy in which wealth concentrates in the hands of a few produces the best for humanity. This was always a distortion of Darwin's ideas. His 1871 book, The Descent of Man, argued that the human species had succeeded because of traits like sharing and compassion. Those communities, he wrote, which included the greatest number of the most sympathetic members, would flourish best and rear the greatest number of offspring. Darwin was no economist, but wealth sharing and cooperation have always looked more consistent with his observations about human survival than the elitism and hierarchy that dominates contemporary corporate life. Nearly 150 years later, modern science has verified Darwin's early insights with direct implications for how we do business in our society. New peer-reviewed research by Michael Tomasello, an American psychologist and co-director of the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany, has synthesized 3 decades of research to develop a comprehensive evolutionary theory of human cooperation. What can we learn about sharing as a result? Tomasello holds that there were 2 key steps that led to humans' unique form of independence. The first was all about who was coming to dinner. Approximately 2 million years ago, a fledgling species known as Homo habilis emerged on the Great Plains of Africa. At the same time that these 4-foot-tall bipedal apes appeared, a period of global cooling produced vast open environments. This climate change event ultimately forced our hominid ancestors to adapt in a new way of life or perish entirely. Since they lacked the ability to take down large game like the ferocious carnivores of the early Pleistocene, the solution they hit upon was scavenging the carcasses of recently killed large mammals. The analysis of fossil bones from this period has revealed evidence of stone tool cut marks overlaid on top of carnivore teeth marks. The precursors of modern humans had a habit of arriving late to the feast. However, this survival strategy brought an entirely new set of challenges. Individuals now had to coordinate their behaviors, work together, and learn how to share. For apes living in the dense rainforest, the search for ripe fruit and nuts was largely an individual activity. But on the plains, our ancestors needed to travel in groups to survive, and the acts of scavenging from a single animal carcass forced proto-humans to learn to tolerate each other and allow each other a fair share. This resulted in a form of social selection that favored cooperation. Individuals who attempted to hog all of the food at a scavenged carcass would be actively repelled by others, writes Tomasello, perhaps shunned in other ways as well. This evolutionary legacy can be seen in our behavior today, particularly among children who are too young to have been taught such notions of fairness. For example, in a 2011 study published in the journal Nature, anthropologist Katarina Hamann and her colleagues found that 3-year-old children share food more equitably if they gain it through cooperative effort rather than via individual labor or no work at all. In contrast, chimpanzees showed no difference in how they shared food under these different scenarios. They wouldn't necessarily hoard the food individually, but they placed no value on cooperative efforts either. The implication, according to Tomasello, is that human evolution has predisposed us to work collaboratively and given us an intuitive sense that cooperation deserves equal rewards. The second step in Tomasello's theory leads directly into what kinds of businesses and economies are more in line with human evolution. Humans have, of course, uniquely large population sizes, much larger than those of other primates. It was the human penchant for cooperation that allowed groups to grow in number and eventually become tribal societies. Humans, more than any other primate, developed psychological adaptations that allowed them to quickly recognize members of their own group through unique behaviors, traditions, or forms of language, and develop a shared cultural identity in the pursuit of a common goal. The result, says Tomasello, was a new kind of interdependence and group-mindedness that went well beyond the joint intentionality of small-scale cooperation to a kind of collective intentionality at the level of the entire society. What does this mean for the different forms of business today? Corporate workplaces probably aren't in sync with our evolutionary roots and may not be good for our long-term success as humans. Corporate culture imposes uniformity mandated from the top down throughout the organization. But the cooperative, the financial model in which a group of members own a business and make the rules about how to run it, is a modern institution that has much in common with the collective tribal heritage of our species. Worker-owned cooperatives are regionally distinct and organized around their constituent members. As a result, worker co-ops develop unique cultures that, following Tomasello's theory, would be expected to better promote a shared identity among all members of the group. The shared identity would give rise to greater trust and collaboration without the need for centralized control. Moreover, the structure of corporations is a recipe for worker alienation and dissatisfaction. Humans have evolved the ability to quickly form collective intentionality that motivates group members to pursue a shared goal. Once they have formed a joint goal, Tomasello says, humans are committed to it. Corporations by law are required to maximize profits for their investors. The shared goal among corporate employees is not to benefit their own community, but rather a distant population of financiers who have no personal connection to their lives or labor. However, because worker-owned cooperatives focus on maximizing value for their members, the cooperative is operated and for the local community, a goal much more consistent with our evolutionary heritage. As Darwin concluded in The Descent of Man, the more enduring social instincts conquer the less persistent instincts. As worker-owned cooperatives continue to gain prominence around the world, we may ultimately witness the downfall of Carnegie's law of competition and a return to the collaborative environments that the human species has long called home. Wow. Okay, a lot to take in. And initially, let's admit it, okay, a lot of people that follow the libertarian bent or the anarcho-capitalist bent, or even the conservative bent or whatever. Now, I mean, I don't really have this big problem with, with Andrew Carnegie, like a lot of people apparently do. And I can see where someone would read this article, okay, and come away with the idea that, oh, wow, no, this is communism. We should all be helping each other. The worker is going to hand off to this person and that. And that's not what this article, I mean, again, I can see where it would be taken that way, but that's not what this article is really saying. Okay. It's saying that, that this whole idea of competition, that you need to be a loner and all this stuff. And it's rewriting our history. It's rewriting, there's something to the idea of survival of the fittest. Okay, but survival of the fittest doesn't always just run to one animal. Like you look at survival of the fittest from an aspect of, okay, so one chimpanzee, because the chimpanzee is so well designed, it survived. No, the chimpanzee designed because it's kind of in a group. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so no one, this isn't like this. Maybe they're trying to push for some degree of communism, but I think that the point it's trying to make is far more accurate in that we're designed to work together. It reminds me of, it sounds far more to me like Leonard Read's iPencil. And if you don't know what iPencil is, it's practically a pamphlet. I guess it's a book though. And in iPencil, it talks about the division. It's laying out the division of labor that, okay, what does it take to make a pencil? And it just goes down this laundry list of everything it takes to make a pencil. And it's not just done by one person. Okay. So this whole idea of survival of the fittest, in the social sense that a lot of libertarians seem to like for some reason, just isn't so. And it's not part of liberty anyway. Because liberty is all about the division of labor, about working together, about the guy, okay, this guy makes lead and he's willing to sell it to me so I can get it from him, and then I can get the wood from this guy over here, and then I can make a pencil. It's a group effort in the first place. Yes, one person maybe came up with the idea for the pencil. Okay, but it wasn't just one person that made it all come together. And what was the pencil needed for? How did the person make money that needed the pencil? They made money because there was people who liked to write, who used writing implements. And so the idea came to him from there. It's an interconnectedness. It's a cooperation in the market, not competition. It's a cooperation in the market that allows these things to come together. Do you see? Okay, this is the point that I'm getting at. And we're designed that way. And I do appreciate the mindlessness that a lot of corporate America today especially puts on to the people. And what I mean by that is you go there, you work, you're in this cubicle, you're totally, cut off from any other person, or at least it can seem that way. And that definitely smacks of, kind of a neo-slavery. There's people who will, who kind of say that, like, corporate culture, it creates, well, this article said it creates uniformity. It creates conformity. Okay. And yeah, the business is not thinking for itself, for its workers. And it's not philosophical. It's just like, okay, how can I get these, these financiers happy? And that's fine. I've been a financier and I want to be happy. Okay. I don't want it to be legally imposed, but I want to be happy. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's just as important to me that the people, like the businesses, like businesses that I would want to fund, say I was an angel investor and I wanted to help a startup. I want to believe in the company and I want that company to do really well. And I want the people in it to be treated well, because in my opinion, and I think this article lays it out as fact, is that if everybody's kind of treated well, everybody's cooperating, then the better things come to be. Okay. So this article isn't a knock on the idea that, we all, everybody gets a fair share. I mean, yeah, it says everybody gets a fair share, but I think the more point on that was that to survive, our ancestors had to know, okay, we had to band together. In fact, there was a volcano, okay, that erupted, I believe, around India. And this was around 70,000 years ago. When that happened, at best guess, there were but a few thousand pansapiens left on the planet. Out of millions, or however many existed before, they were gone. Okay, this was a literal extinction level event when this volcano went off 70,000 years ago. And if you were here's the thing, if our ancestors then were just beating each other up and, proving who was the alpha male and taking from everybody else and forcing the other person, it's like, oh, well, I'm the fittest and I'm going to make you go hunt for me and all this stuff. If that kind of business was happening, we would have never made it, especially in such small numbers. We made it probably because there was a natural division of labor and everybody wanted to bring something to the table to survive. And then later to thrive, to continue on. I love the title to this, Survival of the Nicest. That is so great. Why? There's two things. I mean, you can't take any action unselfishly. It's just not possible. Okay, you're always acting with an enlightened self-interest, whether you realize it or not. In fact, even people like superstitious people, religious people that claim, "Oh, I'm doing this for the Lord." Well, why are you doing it for the Lord? Admit it. It's because, all right, you love him, or because you want to go to heaven or something like that. You're still acting within self-interest. You're still acting essentially selfishly. So you always act within that. Now, you want to survive. So you work. So, these Paleolithic humans worked with each other. They all wanted to live. They all wanted to survive. And so they cooperated. They didn't beat the crap out of each other or threaten to kill the other one because, because they wanted their stuff. It's just it's not how it happened. And science is bearing that out now. Okay. And this whole idea of competition, Google doesn't, here's a modern example. Google doesn't compete. They pretend that you don't exist. Nintendo does the same thing. They don't compete. They just pretend you don't exist and they do their own thing. And Nintendo's an even better example because everybody, remember when the Wii came out? Everybody laughed at motion controllers. Okay, the Wii runs off of those motion controls where you have to actually move to play. You don't just, sit on your ass. And everybody laughed at them. They were doing their own thing. They weren't following the party line. And then the Wii becomes the best-selling video game system of all time. Okay, so this whole idea of, I got to be better than the guy next to me. No. You just got to bring what you've got to the table. And then everything works out. That's how the market works. Even Ludwig von Mises, he hated the word competition. He always used the word cooperation. You can look it up. Human action, even he knew, the study of praxeology, the study of human action, is totally based upon the idea of cooperation, not this competition, crap. Okay? I mean, there's something to be said. You can say something for friendly competitions, like, yeah, I bet I can, get this one faster than you, and that's just having a good time, and that's really cooperating towards each other's goals anyway. But this whole idea, this survival of the fittest stuff is just a misinterpretation, and I agree with the article when it's saying that's not what Darwin meant at all, or at least he wasn't applying it in that. Now, I mean, your genetic traits are survival of the fittest, okay, no doubt about that. But even that comes up to like epigenetics and things of that nature, which is all incredible stuff to research. So let's start maybe. In fact, I wonder how, this isn't trickery. This is facts that we're laying out. And I wonder if maybe we talk to people more in coming from the aspect of cooperation in the market instead of competition in the market. How many people could we attract to the ideas of anarchy and liberty when we do that? And it's not a trick. We're just being more accurate in that's how we are. Okay? And I love how it says that. It's so funny. This whole idea of the law of competition that they laid out with, read this article. Go ahead. It'll be in the show notes, sovereigntech.com or at soundcloud.com/sovereigntech. Read into it. And it just lays right out and says that conformity is a byproduct of that. It's not you besting the other guy. You're just becoming part of the machine. And that's what we're all about, right? We're individualists. I mean, if I could, maybe if I could pick any word to describe me the best, it'd be individualist, because I believe in the individual. And doing this whole, being a part of in the market, the market of competition and whatever, actually takes away your individualism. It's an interesting thought. I mean, and that's something that I think a lot of, libertarians and anarchists and ANCAPs and whatever you want to call yourself, needs to analyze. And, so this leads me to one more thing, where there's so many people that say, oh, well, if we didn't force people to be good, they wouldn't be good. That's not true. In fact, clearly our Paleolithic ancestors were naturally good and were naturally giving. Why? Because empathy is just a fact of nature. The fact that rats have empathy. Rats! Rats have empathy. Why wouldn't we? Again, it's in our nature, and it's always been. I'll be right back with more. You're listening to Sovereign Tech. Are you tired of people wasting away all their precious time? Then stop using the same social media as them. Google Plus is a centralized hub for all of your Google services, your ideas, and your passions. Google Plus has a much more international user base, as to where other forms of social media center around so-called developed nations that really don't do anything exciting in the first place. Google Plus has almost no spam and has very few cat pictures, pictures of police, or anything else government-related. Stop using Facebook. You have an alternative. Start using Google Plus today.
Tech Roulette. Want to play?
It is time for Tech Roulette, where I cover the stories that get submitted to me through the various channels that it can be done through, be it on sovereigntech.com. There's a place to submit posts there. There's also the email, which is sovereigntech@hush.ai. That may be changing soon, but for right now, we're sticking with Hushmail, which is a email service that I certainly highly recommend. Also through the Google Plus page, which is the Google Plus page is my very own Google Plus page. When you connect with me there, you are connecting directly with me. And I recommend you do that. You can just go to gplus.to/Brian Sovryn, and it'll go ahead and circle me, put me, follow me, whatever. Go for it. And that's a great channel I love to use. And Google Plus recently has been very, very much improved. So take a look at it if you haven't in a little while. It's getting better by the day. It was already great, but now it's just getting better. So lots of avenues to get in touch with me. And that's certainly one of them. And pretty much what I do is with all the stories, and I've got plenty of them, but keep them coming, please, because we've got, if you notice in the show numbers, there's 4 digits. And so I plan on doing this for that long. So keep these stories coming, okay? And this one was actually sent through the G Plus page. And this is from The Verge. Lights out. Could a powerful blast from the sun send us back to the Stone Age? That's very interesting. We were just talking about the Stone Age in the last segment. And, in fact, sometimes I really just do this on the fly. And it seems like shows will naturally kind of have a theme about them, even when I didn't plan it, because I just, like I say, I generally do eeny, meeny, miny, mo with these things. And so that's just kind of ironic that we were just talking about the Stone Age and now we might get blasted back to it. Let's start cooperating, or we might. Let's go right into the article. Of all the issues facing the world right now that the U.S. government is concerned about, the sun may seem to be an odd one. But the White House is taking the threat of a massive solar eruption seriously. That's scary because the White House clearly can't solve any problems, not without creating a million more. So I'm a little worried about this, but we'll keep reading the article. Late last month, it released a new, largely overlooked report outlining the risks of solar eruptions that strike the Earth, including the potential to cause massive, months-long power outages affecting upwards of 130 million people in the U.S. alone, in one worst-case scenario. Still more troubling, the report, prepared by space weather experts from multiple government agencies, found that while the U.S. is currently equipped with some of the best machinery for monitoring and forecasting such events, budget cuts over the next decade could put the country at risk of losing critical capabilities that have significant economic and security impacts. That's in quote. The potential for the sun to unleash the big one is here, said Michael Bonadonna, the report's lead author and executive secretary for the National Space Weather Program. The agency is in charge of coordinating these solar monitoring efforts. It's not a question of if, but when, and are we ready? The big one that Bonadonna refers to is an extreme version of a regularly occurring type of solar event known as coronal mass ejection, or CME. Coronal mass ejection. That sounds kind of hot, but obviously it isn't. Or it actually literally is hot, as in like temperature-wise. But anyway, starting in the sun's outer atmosphere, corona, a CME is a powerful blast of millions of tons of solar gas in parts of the sun's magnetic field, which fly toward Earth at around 1 million miles an hour. Such CMEs thin out as they travel through space over days, and by the time they arrive at our planet, most of them go unnoticed, causing only relatively minor disturbances to our planet's own magnetic field. Every 11 years, the sun enters its cyclical period of increased activity called solar maximum, rising the potential for CMEs up to every few days. During this time, there is a heightened chance of especially powerful CMEs with magnetic fields pointed in the opposite direction of Earth's. When one of these CMEs reaches our planet, it can cause a geomagnetic storm, ripping away part of our Earth's own magnetic field in the atmosphere and rearranging it. These violent storms can last for days and result in the beautiful sight of the northern or southern lights, auroras like the aurora borealis, but can also damage several critical technological systems, including GPS, other satellites, airline radio communications, and yes, electrical power grids on the ground. As it turns out, the sun is expected to enter its period of increased activity this year, though so far it's been a relatively quiet one. The Space Weather Prediction Center at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association is in charge of forecasting the intensity of these events using a scale from G1 to G5, higher is worse, and warning all of the industries that might be affected. The fact is, we're almost at a point where if you ask the question, who uses space weather services, my answer is almost everyone, said William Murtaugh, program coordinator for NOAA's Space Prediction Weather Center, also a co-author of the new report. Murtaugh pointed out that even the pipeline industry was at risk of being affected by solar events because pipelines themselves are electrically conductive. Murtaugh's job is to deliver space weather warnings, especially those of geomagnetic storms, to other industries in time for them to take action and avoid heavy damage. Because of that information, industries have managed to avoid damage to their systems from lesser G1 to G4 storms that have occurred over the years. Okay, so these things have happened, and it would appear to me that life has gone on, and no one even really knows about it. In fact, I would have to do research. I'm not aware of where a G4 storm has occurred and that it somehow ruined something. But anyway, we'll keep going. Murtaugh said the success of this program explains why even when there are dire reports of solar flares and storms in the mainstream media, they often don't result in any perceivable damage to the public at large. After the event happens, the media says nothing happened, but with space weather, something's always happening. When it comes to the G5, or Great Geomagnetic Storms, it's unclear that information alone would be enough to mitigate their effects. As Murtaugh told The Verge, we sometimes refer to them as space weather Katrinas. That's, of course, a reference to Hurricane Katrina, which was just an absolute travesty. Let's move ahead a little bit. This is kind of a lengthy article, but you can read it all. You can go to sovryntech.com or soundcloud.com/sovryntech, and all the show notes are there, and you can check it out. So the NOAA, pretty much part of the reason, they're claiming partly that the reason we haven't noticed that these things occur is because they are informing companies what they need to do to keep it from affecting everybody. So that's kind of nice, but at the same time, like, what are they informing them to do? To put an entire warehouse in a Faraday cage? You know what I mean? Now, a Faraday cage, if you're not sure what that is, it's not theoretical, it's real. But like Mylar bags can kind of be considered Faraday cages, where it doesn't allow electrostatic or electromagnetic interference to affect whatever's inside of it. Putting something in lead is kind of like a Faraday cage, because nothing can affect it. So this is the concern. If you're not aware, that an electromagnetic like pulse, a lot of people have heard that term maybe in movies or TV shows, like an EMP, can essentially, kind of fry circuitry. Circuit boards would be affected, power grids can go down, all this stuff because the electromagnetic field changes causes like static. If you work in a technology business, if you're in any kind of like industry with technology, or not even technology, I'm sure just in a lot of engineering, you may be aware that you have to wear like what they call static straps, which is like a wristband or even something you wear on your feet that grounds you to like, say, the bench you're working on. And it keeps you from, if you're handling like a circuit board, if you somehow you produce static, say just from walking around, which can happen, it keeps the static from affecting the board. It keeps you from being conducive, you yourself, your human body, from being electrically conducive. And it's very important because just one little, bit of static shock could ruin an entire circuit board. So it's an important thing, and that's what they're saying is essentially that these CMEs, these coronal mass ejections, again, does that sound hot? These mass ejections can, they could essentially, do the same thing, like create this weird static shift because it actually changes the electromagnetic field of the Earth. And cause the stuff to no longer work anymore. Like I was talking earlier in the article, 130 million people could be without power. Anyway, we'll keep going with the article. In order to forecast these events well in advance and alert those affected to get out of the way or turn equipment off, space weather experts rely on a long list of specialized instruments on the ground and in the sky, all of which could suffer maintenance issues if their budgets are slashed. Yay, give the government more money, blah, blah, blah. But two are of particular importance. The SOHO spacecraft run by NASA and the ESA, which contains chronographs, instruments capable of imaging the area of the sun where CMEs are born. The other is a NASA spacecraft called the Advanced Composition Explorer, which is parked 1 million miles away from the Earth in the direction of the sun. ACE measures solar wind and can provide an hour's notice of a CME hitting the Earth. That's our warning buoy, Bonadonna said, of the a spacecraft. That's the fire alarm going off saying, get out of the house. Meanwhile, if we were to lose that SOHO spacecraft, we lose that ability to forecast geomagnetic storms, Murtaugh said. But while both spacecraft have been extremely reliable so far, they were launched in the mid to late 1990s and could give out at any time. A replacement spacecraft for ACE called Discover is due to launch in 2014, and while several other craft have already been launched to succeed SOHO, none can provide its full capabilities. Meanwhile, studies have found that while massive geomagnetic storms are rare, they are a real and imminent risk, with as much as a 12% chance of one occurring in the next decade, according to some studies. The most recent geomagnetic storm to cause any significant damage to the Earth occurred in 1989 when one knocked out power for nearly the entire province of Quebec, Canada, plunging 6 million people into darkness for 9 hours. Now that's interesting. Okay, there's a G4 that occurred in 1989 that pretty much took out the power for the entirety of Quebec, Canada. Obviously, Quebec is now back to normal and fine. So, how much of this is kind of fear-mongering is something I will definitely leave to you. The power industry runs on a very fine line now, Bonadonna told The Verge. They need to watch solar activity very closely and make sure it doesn't become a problem, but they have done a very good job in the last several years of making improvements. Such improvements include systems to harden power grids and make them more resilient against power surges, and to identify which areas are more at risk. As it turns out, not all areas of the world are equally affected by a geomagnetic storm. Power stations closer to the poles are at greater risk, as are those located in areas where the surrounding ground minerals are more electrically conducive. And we'll skip ahead more. Still, whatever happened, there's no telling when the next nightmare scenario might strike. It might be a G5 storm on the order of 1989 Quebec. Okay, so the Quebec one was actually a G5. So it takes a G5 to really do this kind of damage, and these happen pretty rarely. Or it might be worse. So there can be worse than a G5. In 1859, the Carrington event was a geomagnetic storm so powerful it caused auroras as far south as Cuba and overloaded the dominant communication system of the time, the telegraph, shocking operators, sending sparks flying, and even lighting some small fires. Fast forward 150 years, and the effects to a similarly sized solar storm would be far worse, say Murtaugh and Bonadonna. If you lose dozens of transformers or more and are dealing without power a month for even a year, that's a totally different challenge to society to survive an outage like that, Murtaugh said. Okay, so that's the article. Now, again, how much of this is fear-mongering? I mean, even the article itself, and shame on The Verge. Well, no shame. But, how sad for The Verge to say, look, this is why we got to have tax dollars. Please, this is the only way we can solve it. I think if anybody went up to a company and said, hey, look, this is what can happen. We have a record of it happening in 1859. We have a record of it happening in 1989. You might want to make your business work so that this doesn't, you might want to, like, you go up to an electric company. Say there wasn't a government and you went up to, a private electric company, and you as a, be it a historian, a star watcher, or someone that's involved in like privately studying the sun, to perhaps you run your own little solar electricity business, which actually some private space industries are talking about, like DSI. And you say to them, look, these things happen. It's happened in the past, and Quebec went without power for a while in 1989. It might be in your best interest to prepare for these kind of eventualities. You think a power company is not going to want to solve that? They say, well, the power company doesn't care. Are you kidding? Their employees go home and want to turn on the computer. Of course they care. So I'm a little dismayed with this article that, like, oh, please give us your money, because government's the only thing that can solve it, when actually this probably wouldn't even be an issue if we didn't have governments and we had a genuine, real free market system that allowed for the creation of who knows what kind of wonderful, power alternatives or protections that we could have right now. I mean, that's the easy thing to say in the theoretical. But this is a valid concern all the same. As rare as it is a valid concern, and it has occurred in the past. And right now we are in such a technological utopia that if something like this happened, yeah, we'd have problems. I mean, just think if the water stopped. If the water just stopped flowing for a while. Imagine what that would do. And for, this kind of power to be lost, that could certainly occur. Now, what's the answer to that? Okay, if this sort of thing happened, if suddenly all the computers went down. Well, first off, obviously, like we already said, the answer is not the government. Is the answer something like permaculture? Okay, or people who are into the whole survivalist thing? Well, maybe they could. I think those kind of, that type of person could certainly, who's interested in that sort of thing, could definitely, help people get through these times by showing them. But then that just proves the point that the real answer to this when this occurs is education. Okay. And if you want to have personal redundant systems that somehow allow you, like say you get, like I said, say the water stops flowing, you could have, toilets, self-composting toilets that don't require water at all. You could, have something like that if you're concerned about these things. And it's legit. It is legit, that this can happen. So, but again, I certainly don't expect the government to be able to solve it at all. And actually this article doesn't talk about it, but the NOAA and groups similar to that, the ESA also has similar groups that covers pretty much the entire Commonwealth of Nations, which includes Canada, have been relatively, aware, and they couldn't keep from happening what happened in Quebec in '89. So, but you can look in, more into that. But, what do we do when the lights go out? Should we just we need to stop depending on technology and run away, and go back to the Stone Age, to where these kind of natural events that occur in the universe, everywhere in the universe, that we should just stop? No, that's not going to solve anything. I mean, that kind of, and that's what this article got sent to me by, I think, someone saying, it's like, look, this is why we need to get back to nature and all this stuff. And I'm all fine with getting back to our personal nature. I don't know how much I like green technologies. That's another good thing too, is okay, fine. Yeah. Let's look into green technologies that could somehow survive this sort of thing. And that's the real answer, is not to just shun technology, but to figure out how to keep technology, how to naturally somehow shield technology from electromagnetic or geomagnetic, disturbances and things of that nature. And that's stuff that people are looking into. It is happening. The NOAA is not really looking into it. They're not looking to be proactive, they're proactive in the sense that they're alarming people and letting them know, but no one is trying to figure out, okay, how can we keep, electronics from being affected? What are better ways to, and if this were as serious a problem, again, this whole article is a lot of fear mongering, but if this were as serious a problem, as they're kind of claiming, you could definitely, if there were a free market, they would certainly just figure out something to where, because they're saying they can't get funding like that, to put up more satellites to be able to detect this stuff. Believe me, the free market wouldn't let it fly, and they'd have more satellites up there than you could imagine, with more money than the government could even imagine, as fast as they could. So the real answer here is education, not to go back to the Stone Age. It's just, okay, if this happens, what do we do, and how do we get back from it? And that's stuff that we can all learn. And I'll be right back with more Sovryn Tech.
Are you ready?
I've never seen anyone so treated like a god in my life.
Brian Sovryn as guest co-host tomorrow night, and so that should be a good show.
On that note,
we just added Brian Sovryn.
Okay, we haven't.
Oh, is he good?
He's been in the audience.
He's certainly got opinions on things. Yes.
I'm so close to being like God. No one is above me. Okay, absolutely no one. I don't take orders from anybody, and I mean that's how much closer to God can you get?
Is there anything he doesn't do better than everyone else? Oh, that's just his way of talking. He's one of the best.
Break it down!
Catch Sovryn Tech, the show about technology and how it can set you free with me, Brian Sovryn. That's Sovryn at soundcloud.com/Sovryn Tech.
Think you can tell me what to do?
Wow. Oh. It's a website of the week.
It is time for Website of the Week, where I cover websites that I consider particularly useful, educational, fun even, or whatever, just something I may seem, find interesting to share with my listeners, or that just tickles my fancy somehow. But anyway, this definitely falls under education, and it is a website that is absolutely fascinating, incredibly important, in my opinion, and it is one of the few websites and few resources I've seen out there where I feel like, okay, whoever's running all this is definitely thinking differently, and they're definitely thinking, for starters. And they're really advancing human thought in human existence in a very real way. This is very exciting. It's one of the best websites, personally, in my opinion, on the internet, and one of the most important. And it is the Albert Einstein Institution. Okay, and you can go to Einstein, that's EINSTEIN.org. And of course, it'll be in the show notes. But Einstein.org. And what is the Albert Einstein Institution? Well, real quick, the Albert Einstein Institution is a nonprofit organization advancing the study and use of strategic, nonviolent action in conflicts throughout the world. We are committed to the defense of freedom, democracy, unfortunately, and the reduction of political violence through the use of nonviolent action. Our goals are to understand the dynamics of nonviolent action in conflicts, to explore its policy potential, and to communicate this through print and other media, translations, conferences, consultations, and workshops. Okay, there it is. And it's beautiful. There's lots of free books to download by pretty much the head guy at the Albert Einstein Institute, Gene Sharp. They offer free books, and of course there's also even deeper books that you can purchase that go into the subject a lot more. And it is incredible. It is the idea that wars don't have to be fought violently, or that wars don't even have to be fought. It is the idea that nonviolence may be more effective, which there's plenty of proof for that, and you can look at this website and look into it, that nonviolence may be 10 to 100 times more effective than violent action. It asks the big question that why is national defense, not that I care about nations, I'm an anarchist, okay, but why does national defense immediately equate superior firepower? You ever thought about that question before? I certainly had kind of stumbled on it, but it wasn't until I was reading some of the books from this website where it was literally laid out. It's like, why do we instantly think that it requires the ability to unleash violent force as equatable to national defense? There is no reason to think that. Just no one ever asked that question before. Very, very impressive. That question alone is an astonishing thing. But if you're wondering, a lot of liberty-minded people, a lot of anarchists, they instantly goes like, look, we got to bring down the state, we got to go to violence. No, we do not. Well, then what do we do? This website gives you some of your answers, or at least your possibilities that you have. It is fantastic. It is unfortunately interested in policy and politics. Of course, those words come from the same thing. But all the same, it is definitely stuff that can be used for, in anarchist thought. And other big questions that it kind of asks is that, okay, just because say an opposing force or an occupying force is in a landmass, does that mean that they own the landmass? No, not necessarily. And quite frankly, it's interesting questions to ask because I think if you live in the United States, you live in an occupied country right now. It's occupied by the government. Ugh. It's Brian Sovryn. I'll be back with more.
Time now for 90 Seconds on Sex with Dr. Paul.
Researchers have just published a new study on young men who have normal erections but take erection drugs for recreational purposes. Now, this might be due to unreal expectations that their penis needs to be like those of porn stars who are probably taking erection drugs themselves. Now, the problem is that once young men who don't need erection drugs start taking them, they become less confident in their own erections. They expect erections that are harder than normal and quicker on the rebound, so they give themselves a false expectation of what an erection is supposed to be. Now, it's interesting that one of the disappointments that older men with erectile dysfunction have with these drugs is that they aren't able to recreate the kind of erections that these guys had when they were young. But for 20-year-olds without erection problems, drugs like Viagra and Cialis don't have the difficult job of raising the dead, so to speak. So the drug has a better chance of creating a porn-like erection, although not all guys like the sensation that results. If you have normal erections, please understand that nature didn't create them to be like baseball bats. And no matter what your age, if you don't need erection pills, please don't take them, because the latest research seems to suggest that you might end up depending needlessly on expensive pills when the money would be better spent on flowers and romance.
For more, visit 90secondsonsex.com.
It is time for listener emails, where I go meeny, meeny, miny, mo, or I judge something by its timeliness to be talked about that gets sent to me through the various channels. It's kind of similar to Tech Roulette, but in this case, you're not just sending me a story. You're more asking maybe my opinion on things or what I think of something. And you are welcome. You are always, always welcome to ask me really anything you want. I've said that before in the show, but you definitely can. You can email me, sovereigntech@hush.ai. You can get in touch with me on my own personal Google Plus page, which I am inviting you to join me on, especially with Google Plus being really kind of new and fresh right now. And so don't hesitate. Ask me whatever you want. You want to ask me, how did I become an anarchist, or what do I think of, what do I think of the red and black, or what do I think of communism, or what do I think about whatever, what do I think about platypi, just. You can ask me whatever, and eventually, if not right away, I'll get to it on the listener email section, which is what we're in right now. Also, if it is a question, say it's a technical question, or maybe even an investment question or something along those lines, to where it's very time sensitive, as in, look, I'm going to do this buy in a couple days, and I've gotten these questions before in the past. And it's very time sensitive. I won't wait to answer it on the show. I'll answer it on the show later, but you can say, look, I really need to know this kind of like right now. And if I have the opportunity, I won't always, admittedly, but if I have the opportunity, I will answer your question by email as soon as possible. So keep that in mind. Here I am, Brian Sovryn, a anarchist liberty resource ready for you. How about that? And this week's question it's one I got a little while back, and I've been very reticent to kind of talk about it. I haven't been reticent, but I wanted to be very careful, and I still want to be very careful in how I talk about it. So I may get something wrong here, or I may say something that I didn't necessarily mean. And if you have more questions about it, hey, that's what this section's all about, asking me questions and allowing me to elaborate. Okay. And this is about porn. What are my opinions on porn? And, what does that have to do with technology? Well, quite frankly, it has everything to do with technology, because in a lot of ways, technology has been forwarded by the desire for sex and explicit sex and for really pornography in many ways. In fact, I can readily envision that perhaps the first time something was written down, by our ancient ancestors, that it was perhaps some form of love letter saying, I would really enjoy copulating in my cave with you, and, something to that effect. But who knows, but I could believe that. But anyway, so it has everything to do with technology. And, there's the common adage that the internet is for porn. That was like a song, right? That's what, or there's like Rule 34 that eventually everything turns into porn. So everything in a lot of ways has to do with porn, right? So it's not an unfair question to ask, a tech journalist like myself. And I do have, admittedly, somewhat of some skin in the game, no pun intended, with porn, as to where there are members of my family that are involved in it. And I won't mention names, but they are they are big deals in the porn business. And so I have been on a porn set. I have seen, what exactly how all that goes down. I've seen it in its production. I am also an avid reader of erotica. In fact, next to a couple other subjects, it's probably the thing I read the most. Because, why wouldn't you read about sex? Come on. Anyway, So as far as porn, okay, I think the quick question that like everybody wants to get down to is, is porn right or wrong? And that doesn't have an immediate answer. Okay. We can come up with the vulgar liberty answer and just say that, well, hey, as long as it's voluntary, you can do whatever you want. No, I don't agree with that. Okay. Because there are things, because to say for something, is that accurate? Okay. As long as it's voluntary, sure. But then you have to ask yourself, how far does voluntary go? Because if someone's psyche is acting outside of their best interests, okay, if there's a psychological problem, say something from their past that is causing, let's look at it from the other side. All right, I'm kind of jumping around here, but let's look at it from the other side. Let's say something happened to you when you were young, and that has made you very anti-sex. Okay, are you going to say that sex is wrong? No. You wouldn't say sex is wrong. It just is. All right. So you can come at that from both sides in that, that's why you can't just come right out and say, is porn right or wrong? Porn is essentially the display of sex. Now, is the way that say women are portrayed in porn, or the way that even men are portrayed in porn, are those right or wrong? Now, those are a little more, that's actually more to the question. Okay, is the act of displaying humans having sex for the enjoyment of other people to view later on wrong? No. It can't be. It's just sex. But now now we have to get into the deeper end of things. Okay, why is that person, performing in porn? In that case, that's where perhaps the ethics come into question, as in, is this person being forced to do it? Is this person, because, they're addicted to drugs because their parents beat the shit out of them, that they're on this set? Okay, in that case, if you take an example like that, then yeah, it's unethical, I would say. Okay, so do you see how this is kind of how you ask this question is very, it can be very dicey. And one of my biggest problems is the social conservative answer in that, I can't believe they're doing that. This is terrible. No, obviously not. I think I've made it very clear on this show in the past that one of my goals in life is to, well, for lack of a better phrase, destroy social conservatism. I want it gone. Because it's making, if anything, here's another thing. Porn can be a very, very beautiful thing. I'm not saying that the average porn that you catch on Pornhub or RedTube.com is somehow good and ethical, or that, that somehow that's okay. I'm not saying that. But what I am getting at, there's a lot of porn that can be a very beautiful thing. And if there is porn that's unethical, or if there is porn that is somehow, treating either a man or woman, in a very, very derisive way, that I believe can be very much a byproduct of our socially conservative society. Okay. Of Puritanism, because it's pushing it all underground. It's pushing it all underground. It's making people think that they are doing something wrong when maybe they're not. And it's turning things that are absolutely natural, into something very dirty, quote unquote, when it's not. It's a beautiful thing. So no, I don't really have a problem. I don't have a problem with porn in concept. Okay, in the abstract, I have zero problem with porn. Frankly, this is, and you can call me crazy, that's fine. I wouldn't mind if, say I lived in, say I lived in a housing complex of some kind, or not a complex, but let's say I was just living in a town and I had my house, and then there was a house, a few hundred feet away, and say the people who lived in that house were having sex out on the, out on the back deck, and I could see them, and, and they were just doing it and didn't care. fine. I don't care either. You know, I don't, and I do the same thing, quite frankly. Why? You know, this whole idea that a lot of this comes from the notion that somehow sex is this very personal thing. And it can be if you want it to be. That's okay. But it is one of the most basic things that we do. And it's disgusting how porn companies are constantly attacked by governments from around the world, and how porn is constantly attacked as being immoral or as being disgusting, when, boy, you can watch people blowing limbs off and, you know, and guns everywhere, body parts flying, death, boom, boom, and nobody says a word. Even Christians, even the most religious of people will say, oh, that's fine. That's war. War is hell. And what? So you can see that, and I mean, they're claiming sex is hell too. Why can't we see that? Why does that get shoved underground? I mean, it's a great question. And now, I mean, do I feel that a lot of these people that work in porn, like I said, I have been on porn sets. Do I feel that these people are very, they're not very self-aware, and that they could definitely, you know, use a lot of introspective thinking into what they're doing? Yes, certainly. There are plenty of people in porn who I don't think it's not beneficial to them to be in porn, and it may not be what their authentic self really wants. At the same time, I do think that there are people who are very self-aware, who are involved in that industry, not just porn, but prostitution. You know, pick your flavor. And that they're very, very much aware of what they're doing, and that there is absolutely nothing wrong with what they're doing, even if they charged money for it. Which, I mean, the porn star, you know, again, that's what a lot of people say. What's the difference between a porn star and a prostitute? There's a camera. That's the only difference for the porn star. You know, that's what some people say. And I think a person can be, you know, I mean, I don't like the harshness of that, but my point being is that I think a person can be very self-aware and be involved in that. There are porn sites that do, like I talked about, you know, how porn could be very beautiful. There are sites out there that are very beautiful in their presentation of sexual matters. There's passion-hd.com. That's a pretty popular one, where it is, I mean, these are people living it up, you know, and these porn sets are very, very nice. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch. There's another, I can't think of the other one, but there's another one where it's all women. And I mean, I think these women are very self-aware, and they're just celebrating femininity. And I think that's great. So there's, you know, it can be a really gorgeous thing. There's no doubt about it that a lot of this, like gonzo porn kind of stuff, a lot of, you know, this really like hardcore business, you know, yeah, that, you know, that makes me wonder. And like, I'm not a fan of BDSM. I do think the idea of you enjoying pain, I mean, just run that, run that thought through your head. I enjoy receiving pain, and just, you know, tell me where that, explain to me where that's like a genetic trait. You know, I mean, that's like the whole point. Like, why do I have senses? You have senses to, in many ways, to experience the world, but also to keep you from avoiding harm. So how could it be natural for you to enjoy getting harmed? So, you know, there's that aspect of it too. Like I say, I realize I'm kind of all over the place with this, but it's a huge topic. I may do a special on it in the near future. But another point is that, and here's something I want to point out real quick. This is an important point. A lot of people say that breasts aren't a big deal, that it's an American-like fetish because of the porn industry, and because you know, because women are forced to wear clothing that doesn't show them. I totally disagree, because if you look at Venus goddess statues from 10,000 years ago, breasts were a big deal even back then. We've always loved porn. This is Brian Sovryn. I'll be back with more.
Got an energy spike.
Launch. In the third age of mankind, an age plagued by an evil empire that seeks to destroy humanity, it is our last, best hope for peace. It is Babylon 5.
All fighter squadrons launched.
Get us out of here. Return fire.
Freeze them!
Watch Babylon 5.
You can watch Babylon 5 and experience the greatest show in television history. See the entire series completely free by going to the WB.com/shows/Babylon 5.
Software of the Week.
It is time for Software of the Week, where I cover a piece of software that may completely suck, or it could be the greatest thing since sliced bread. Just kidding, because sliced bread isn't great. It's actually rather harmful to you and can kill your sex drive because it's grains, and why would you want your sex drive killed? That's just the question that goes into my mind. Doesn't have to be the one in yours. What we're going to talk about this week for Software of the Week, this is something that's been around for a little bit, but it's just starting to really spread because it just got added onto iOS, and it looks like, as has been rumored for months, that it's going to start appearing on Google Chrome, the web browser. And this is Google Now. Now, if you don't know what Google Now is, it's essentially, if you look on your phone, if you have an Android phone or now even an iOS, an iPhone, or an iPad, if you look on it and you look towards the top or wherever you happen to put it, and you see the Google search bar, as soon as you hit that, as soon as you press that search bar, that's Google Now. Because what it does is it creates these little cards that come up that tell you the weather, it tells you like local ticket times, it tells you when your plane is going to leave, it tells you all these things. Wait a minute, how does it know all that before I even ask it? Because it bases it on the searches that you normally put into Google, or it bases it upon like emails that you receive in Gmail. And before you think that that's really scary, that they know that much about you, just understand that you're giving them the information in the first place by using Google. It only knows what you give them. Okay, it's not scanning your Hushmail account. It's not scanning what you do on Yahoo. All right, to be able to give you those cards. It's only searching within what you actually give to Google. So be aware that this is relatively voluntary. And if you don't want Google Now to know that much about you, stop using Google services. Okay, but I find Google Now to be incredibly useful. I see it as it's far more helpful to me than Siri ever could be, which Siri is Apple's version of Google Now, where you ask it a question and then it replies. You can do the same thing. You can talk to Google Now and it will give you an answer, of course not in a verbal form like Siri would, but in a card form. But I mean, it just, it knows. It was amazing. When I went to Terracoin Conference 2013 in San Jose, the day before, it gave me the weather. My plane was going to stop in Denver and then in San Jose. The night before leaving, Google Now gave me the cards for the weather in Denver for the next day and in San Jose for the next day. It told me when my flight was going to leave. It told me how long I had, it brought up the option to get directions to the airport in Google Maps. It did all this stuff. It'll talk about personal assistant. Okay, and I've been in jobs where, I've had a secretary, that does all this stuff, and wow, Google Now did everything that a secretary would. Fantastic. I love it. And now it's available for iOS. And I loved Google's attitude. And we'll be talking about this more during Pick of the Week when we talk about Google I/O 2013. But Google's attitude is like, look, we do web services. This is what we do. And there's no reason for that to be platform specific. So Google, with releasing Google Now for pretty much everything. And again, it's going to be coming soon to where it works just in your Chrome browser. Amazing. They're making Apple and Microsoft and BlackBerry and whoever else, they're just making them look like, quite frankly, like jerks. Because no, our services you can only get on our platform is where Google says, we'll give it all to you, baby, and use it how you wish. And it's true. And Apple users are just they're eating it up. They want it all over. They love Google Now, just like when Google Maps went away for Apple users. As soon as it came back, it was the most downloaded app in pretty much, I think, in App Store history for Apple, because this is what people want. So Google Now, check it out if you haven't. It is amazing how much it helps you and how much useful information it just brings to your, right to your eyes. Fabulous. This is Brian Sovryn, and I'll be back with more.
What does freedom mean? Tune in to LRN.FM to find out. LRN.FM is the Liberty Radio Network, a collection of live talk radio and podcasts, all coming from a principled pro-liberty perspective. LRN.FM show hosts aren't left, right, or conspiracy kooks. You can tune in 24/7 to LRN.FM via your phone, computer, satellite, and more. Listen free anytime at LRN.FM. That's LRN.FM.
Brian! Stop playing those video games!
Just a minute, Mom.
Game Talk.
It is time for Game Talk, one of my favorite parts of the show. Just so you know, I mean, I'll make this announcement really fast with Game Talk. Again, we talk about games, gaming news, even how it can pertain to liberty at times or to health, because, I mean, liberty is all about health too, right? But real quick, just a piece of news. Microsoft finally did hold their little press conference as to what the next Xbox is going to be, and it's called the Xbox One. And I haven't looked into it too much because I don't care a whole lot about console gaming except for maybe Nintendo. But the only tidbit of news that I am aware of, and I haven't looked into this enough yet, but you can check it out for yourself, is that when the Xbox One, when they released it after the conference and the news was out about it, the stock for Sony skyrocketed. Whatever that says about the Xbox One, I don't know, but take a look. I'll also, from what I understand, it's not backwards compatible at all with any previous Xbox systems. Not that that would be a really new thing. But anyway, so just letting you know that that's out there and that is happening if that's something you're interested in. Maybe you want to ask me, what do I consider, a great console? We can do that for listener email, or, we could do a breakdown of consoles. Or if you had to buy Brian Sovryn, Golden Stallion, if you had to buy a console today, which one would you buy? If you're interested in that question, go ahead and ask me, and we'll talk about it in the listener email section. Anyway, this is a story from Kotaku. I get lots of stories from Kotaku. It's a great aggregator of game stories, and this is also oddly kind of falling in line with kind of the theme of the show, where we've been talking about the Stone Age to some degree, or paleo and like the paleo lifestyle. And this article is by Kirk Hamilton, and it's a whole new way to play video games. Standing up. Now, I've talked about this before in the show. Actually, there's a good 3 episodes where I wasn't in the studio. I was on location. And each time I did that, I was actually standing up for the whole show. Pretty much 2 hours strong. I was standing up. And so it's something that I'm very interested in. I like the idea of standing desks, and I have not really done this. I might try this later. I might try out, okay, what's it like to, to stand up and play a video game? Maybe I'll give that a shot. But anyway, let's read the article. It's not every day you discover a whole new way to play video games. Yet over the past month, I've done just that. I've found a way to play games that makes me feel better, more alert, healthier, and more involved. How have I accomplished this? I started playing video games while standing up. Oh, damn it, you're probably saying, vigorously tapping a fresh pack of cigarettes on your palm while gazing into the middle distance. Another article about the perils of sitting. And yeah, that's what this article is, but really it's just my story. I didn't anticipate how much I'd like standing, so I thought I'd share the story of how I came to start playing video games and working while standing up. Since I started working for Kotaku full-time a year ago, I found myself sitting a lot more than I used to. I spent 7 years as a music teacher, and I used to bike to school every day and spend a few hours on my feet in front of a class directing a band. My day-to-day didn't feature all that much sitting. I also had a more flexible schedule and would run in the park just about every day. What sitting I did was broken up by long periods of standing, walking, running, and bike riding. When I started writing full-time, that changed. I don't have time to run most days. I spend my shift sitting in front of a computer, and when I'm reviewing a game, my nights are spent playing it. During the 2011 fall video game rush, I found myself sitting down for 12 hours or more with minimal standing breaks, often for days on end. Every day it seemed I saw another article about the perils of too much sitting. Sitting is bad for you. Sitting for more than 11 hours a day greatly increases your chances of dying in the next 3 years. Exercise won't counteract it either. Sitting is itself a damaging thing to do to your body. But really, I didn't need to read those studies. I only needed to listen to what my body was telling me. My energy levels had plummeted. My digestion felt weird, and I was never hungry. My legs would ache when I'd stand. They'd feel swollen and off somehow, like they weren't getting enough blood. My lower back became more prone to painful freakouts, especially when I'd sneeze. Basically, everything from my rib cage down was asking me repeatedly, "Dude, what are you doing?" My body did not like my new lifestyle. At the same time, I'd seen all these articles about the dangers of sitting. I'd also seen more and more people talking about the merits of standing desks. I began to read. Here's what I learned. It's best to try converting your desk into a temporary standing situation before buying an expensive standing desk. It's not healthy to stand all the time. It's good to take breaks and keep a balance. Still, standing for the majority of your day is better than sitting for the majority of your day. Your feet will get sore, and it's good to get some sort of pad or wear comfy shoes. Okay, I thought, I can give this a shot. I started homemade. I took a shelf off the bookshelf in my kitchen and placed it on 2 coffee cans, upon which I placed my monitor. I put another piece of wood on top of 2 cardboard boxes and put my keyboard on that. Before long, I had a desk at which I could stand and work. It didn't take long for me to realize that, yes, this was something I was interested in. After a couple days working while standing up, only working, mind you, playing video games didn't come until later, I already felt better, stronger, and healthier. My legs were sore in a good way, and my posture was good all day, and I felt more focused as I worked. I decided to invest in a standing desk. And he got the Ergotron WorkFit S single HD workstation, which cost him about $400. There's quite a few out there. I recommend looking into them. We've kind of talked about them before on Sovryn Tech. So the weekend after I got my standing desk set up, the Guild Wars 2 beta was happening. I've been interested in this game for a number of reasons, mainly because it looks like a lot of fun and like it might welcome non-MMO players like me into the fold. I got into the beta and decided to do an experiment. I'd play through the beta weekend while standing up. Saturday morning, I got up, logged on, and started playing, standing. And it was great. A lot of times, MMO-style PC games can make me tune out a bit after a while. It's probably due to years of console controller usage, but I don't always feel as engaged at the mouse and keyboard as I did when I was a kid. The moment I stood up, that went away entirely. I felt present and connected to the game in a way I hadn't in a while. Alert and easily able to manipulate the game to do my bidding. Anytime my feet felt tired or I wanted to take a break, I simply slid the Ergotron down to a sitting position and played while sitting. The standing mount brings my monitor much closer to my face than it usually is, which connects me in the game while letting me keep a consistent angle for my head and shoulders. Anytime I need to rest my eyes, I just turn away and walk away from the computer, pace around a bit, make a phone call, whatever. Everything feels more fluid, faster, and easier than when I played while sitting down. It didn't stop at Guild Wars 2. My newfound love of standing has now gone beyond traditional mouse and keyboard PC games. I play a lot of games on my PC with a controller, from cross-platform games like Bulletstorm and Far Cry 2 to platformers like Limbo and Braid. It used to be I'd move my PC over to my HD TV to play those on a big screen. These days I leave it plugged in my desk and play these games standing up. My now second playthrough of Knights of the Old Republic, standing. This last weekend playing Skyrim Dawnguard, upright. Playing a first-person game while standing up is a heightened, highly enjoyable experience. It sounds a bit silly, but when I play Far Cry 2 while standing, I feel more connected to my silent avatar. After all, he's standing too, isn't he? I don't exactly roleplay it. I don't kneel in the bushes and take a knee when sliding, but I do feel more physically involved in the game. In other words, standing has begun to move beyond health for me. It started to actually make the games better. And when you think about it, it makes sense. Many of our first gaming experiences involved standing at arcade machines, joystick in hand. There's something to be said for returning to that feeling. I never felt listless or uncomfortable when I was at the arcade. I felt loose and free, engaged and awake. It wasn't entirely due to the fact that I was standing, but it certainly didn't hurt. And he hit the main point that I wanted to get at, is that, this is how video games used to be played. Like, it was just normal. We didn't sit down at anything. From Computer Wars to Pong to Pac-Man, keep going up to Defender Stargate, keep going up the list to Frogger, Space Invaders, Time Tunnel, name the classic game, Red Baron, whatever. You stood at all of them. eventually, like, it kind of became like a nicety that some of these games would have like a bench on them, like when Steel Talon came out, which was a helicopter simulator game that had a sit down like feel to it. But then that got you more intense into the game, which is his point, is that a lot of these games really are more engaging when you're standing up. As to where, okay, yeah, if you're playing Steel Talon, you're supposed to be inside of like a helicopter cockpit, so it would make sense that you'd be sitting down, and it made you feel more engaged. So this like isn't new news. He's treating it as new, and nobody apparently really does it unless you use like the Wii. But that's something I wonder if Nintendo had that little secret up their sleeve. They said, no, you know what? If we get them moving when they play the games with motion controls, they'll get more engaged. And then, like we said earlier in the show, the Wii became the best-selling console of all time. So give it a shot, standing while playing. This is Brian Sovryn.
Are you searching for a mouth-watering, all-natural, sweet and sticky treat? What if I told you it was also made by a chef who believes in freedom, just like you? You're not dreaming. This is real. Head over to mandrick.com. That's MANDRIK.com. There you'll find George's famous baklava in classic and dark chocolate flavors. To those with special health needs, George's famous baklava also has a treat for you. Golden delicious, low-carb, gluten-free almond cookies. Order with PayPal or Bitcoins. In just a few days, your sweet treats will await you right at your doorstep. One more time, that's MANDRIK.com for George's famous baklava. Hacker Stories.
It is time for Hacker Stories, where we talk about some of the heroic acts and some of the heroes on planet Earth, be they black hat, white hat, or gray hat. We talk about hackers and hacking in general. Admittedly, okay, there are such things as malicious hacking attacks, okay? Some people have gotten confused and they think that I don't believe that. The point that I make in that when I consider a lot of black hat hackers, which are considered the malicious types, where I consider them heroes as well, is because a lot of times their actions are like against, say, the government, and that a lot of times the news industry is painting a situation to be malicious or malevolent, or they're painting it to be a fear-mongering piece, when actually it's not that at all, and that the real criminal could actually be the person that the hacker is exploiting or going, or doing their hacking against. And that's my point. But there definitely are there are people out there, and I dare say that I think half of them work for governments, that do genuine malevolent acts of hacking. I would love for there to be, and I'm not the person to do this, someone in the 2600 community like Emmanuel Goldstein or somebody far more prominent would be far better to do this. But there should be another term. Maybe there already is, and I just can't think of it right this second. But maybe there should be another term for that kind of, besides black hat, white hat, gray hat, maybe there should be some kind of term for someone that is just really, really kind of twisted, in what they do with a computer. And, if you know what it is, you can email me at sovereigntech@hush.ai. But anyway, let's look at this story, and we'll talk about it, whether or not this was malicious. And this story comes from Ars Technica, a huge tech blog. And this is from May 3rd of 2013. And it's Internet Explorer Zero-Day Exploit Targets Nuclear Weapons Researchers. Okay, so what is a zero-day exploit? A zero-day, or it can also be a 0 hour or like a day zero attack or exploit. It's a computer threat that tries to, exploit like like the vulnerabilities of something. Okay, they call it 0 day essentially because, like, say the developers of software, they couldn't address or they couldn't really patch the vulnerability that gets used, as in it was released with this vulnerability into it and someone knew about it right away, and so they used it instantaneously and there was no time to fix it, because maybe it was even a feature of say the software like Internet Explorer. And so that's what a 0 day means, is that it's something that was, instantly, it may be a feature or just a vulnerability that's kind of built in or at least ignored with software. or on a computer, and that it was used to hack, use it as the vehicle to hack with. So if you didn't know what that was, that's what that is. And okay, the article goes on. Attackers exploited a previously unknown, and it's interesting that they're calling him. Now, Ars Technica is pretty pro-hacker, from what I understand. So it's interesting that they call them attackers. Now, maybe that's the term we need to use, is that they're not hackers, they're more attackers. I don't know. But let's see if these guys are even bad guys. Attackers exploited a previously unknown and currently unpatched security bug in Microsoft's Internet Explorer browser to surreptitiously install malware on the computers of federal government workers involved in nuclear weapons research, researchers said on Friday. The attack code appears to have exploited a zero-day vulnerability in IE version 8, that's Internet Explorer 8, when running on Windows XP. Researchers from security firm Invincia said in a blog post, the researchers have received reports that IE running on Windows 7 is susceptible to the same exploit, but have not been able to independently confirm that. Version 6 and 7 of the Microsoft browser don't appear to be vulnerable. And there's an update here in an advisory published a couple hours after this article went live, talking about the article we're reading right now. Microsoft confirmed a code execution vulnerability in IE8. Version 6, 7, 9, and 10 of the browser are immune to the exploit. People using IE8 should upgrade to versions 9 or 10 if possible. Those who are unable to move away from version 8 should take the following mitigations, and then it gives a list of things to do. You can check that out in the show notes if you want. The attack was triggered by a U.S. Department of Labor website that was compromised to redirect visitors to a series of intermediary addresses that ultimately exploited the vulnerability, according to Invincia. The exploit caused vulnerable Windows machines to be compromised by Poison Ivy, a notorious backdoor Trojan that had been modified so it was detected by only 2 of 46 major antivirus programs in the hours immediately following the attack. The specific web pages that were hacked dealt with illnesses suffered by employees and contractors developing atomic weapons for the Department of Energy, the blog post said, citing this report from NextGov. That's consistent with the so-called watering hole attacks in which employees of a targeted organization are infected by planting malware on the sites they're known to frequent. The target of this attack appears to be employees of the Department of Energy that likely work in nuclear weapons research, Invincia researchers wrote in a separate report published Wednesday. The report went on to cite this technical analysis from security firm AlienVault. It found indicators in the command servers Poison Ivy contacted that the attack was carried out by Deep Panda, a group of hackers believed to be located in China and carry out espionage attacks on other countries. Initial reports about the Department of Labor website compromise said an older IE vulnerability that Microsoft patched in January had been exploited. It was only in Friday's report that Invincia said this assessment is incorrect. For non-Invincia users, there are known mitigations for this exploit that is currently in the wild. Friday's report warned, for users of IE8, there is no patch currently available, and with this exploit being out in the wild, the potential risk for damage is high. Okay, a lot to take in there. First off, I imagine most of my listeners aren't using Internet Explorer. Only the United States government would still be using IE8. Or Windows XP for that. Well, that's not true. I like Windows XP. That is, Windows XP, I've always said, will probably go down as perhaps the greatest operating system of all time. So I'm not knocking that so much. But then most people I know that use Windows XP use Google Chrome. So what the hell are you doing using IE8? Anyway, that said, now, if this is coming from, and we don't know, it's a group called Deep Panda, supposedly, and it's actually what they're claiming is, or what they're hinting at, is that the Chinese government is going after scientists that develop nuclear weapons in the United States. Maybe. If so, this kind of nonsense is governments against governments, and may just prove the point of what I think may be the actual point, that, look, nuclear weapons can't be trusted with anybody or any group of people. That doesn't mean I say ban nuclear weapons. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that the last thing you want in charge of a nuclear weapon is a government, because they still use antiquated software like IE8. But I'd be far more likely to believe that Deep Panda, or whatever actual group of hackers that did this, were idealists and had a philosophical grounds, as in they wanted to perhaps, and I'm not saying that it's right, to go, maliciously, accostize people or that are involved in nuclear research. But I would believe that was more the idea, is that it was just some group of hackers who are like, look, nuclear weapons are a terrible thing, okay, in their very existence, which frankly I agree with. Like I said, I'm not saying ban nuclear weapons. I'm not saying nuclear weapons can't be developed. I'm just saying that, I would love the world where they didn't exist, where I wasn't worried about that much destruction ever able to happen. At least on Earth. And so I would believe that it was more a group of just people like saying, you're making nuclear weapons, you're developing, atomic weaponry. We don't like that. We're going to mess with you. We're going to make your life hell so that you know that this is wrong, quote unquote. I don't necessarily even support that kind of action, but I guess it is a way to make a political statement. Fortunately, they weren't actually, at least it seems they weren't actually able to control the nuclear weapons, because I don't want hackers to have that ability either. Unless they wanted to shut them down, maybe. Because I never want one of those launched. Anyway, just a thought. Interesting. I'll be back with more. This is Sovryn Tech.
Oh, yeah.
This is Stephanie Murphy, Sovryn Tech producer. You may know me from this show, but did you know that I have my own podcast? It's called Pork Therapy. Pork Therapy is a bit different from other shows. We cover current events, big ideas, and even relationship issues, all through the lens of how we can get more freedom in our lives. Oh, and you'll love Sex and Science Hour. Join me on my website, porktherapy.com. That's porctherapy.com. Now back to Sovryn Tech.
What are you doing? I can't believe I caught you again. Jesus doesn't approve of this little habit of yours.
I know, baby, I know it's wrong, but it feels so right.
Well, it ain't.
But I've been doing it since I was 12 years old.
It's nothing but a sinful perversion of nature, if you ask me.
But, baby, I don't ever want to stop looking at tech websites, new gadgets, video games, software, or any of that stuff.
Well, then I'm leaving.
Okay. Bye.
Pick of the week.
It is time for Pick of the Week, where I cover, something that either I find interesting. Could be a movie, could be an event, could be a comic book, could be a game. I mean, you name it. Could be a TV show, could be a topic, could be just a topic of some kind, or a philosophy or whatever. Who knows? It can be anything I want. It's part of the show where I discuss things, even perhaps when they're not, when they don't have anything really to do with science and technology. It's just kind of a nice, fun way to end the show. I really sometimes, especially with Sovryn Tech specials, I can end the show on a pretty low note, and I don't care for that. I like the last segment of something to kind of be fun. But anyway, this is about an event, and it is certainly relative to technology, and it's about a really huge event that occurred on May 15th of 2013, and that is WgrIo 2013, which is essentially their developer conference. It's similar to Apple holds what they call the WWDC, the Worldwide Developer Conference, and that developer conference became very popular because it's the time when Steve Jobs and Apple would essentially release, new iPads and new iPods and new computers, and all these new products would come out at that time. And WgrIo is definitely a copy of that model, but they're doing very well. It's just as good. There's nothing wrong with them, copying that idea. Last year's WgrIo saw the introduction of the Nexus 10, I believe, or it was the Nexus 7, the Nexus Q. A whole slew of new products came out from Google last year's 2012, a lot of hardware. And interestingly, this year at WgrIo 2013, there wasn't really any hardware released, and really nothing new. In fact, the only piece of hardware that was even really talked about was that they came out with a Google edition of the Galaxy S4, of Samsung's Galaxy S4, which you could buy for $650. And that is essentially, the Google edition means that it has the pure Android experience like you'd get with any kind of Nexus device. Like my personal phone is a Galaxy Nexus, and that gets in. What's the importance of having a Nexus device, of having a Google-backed device, is that you constantly get the latest version of Android that comes out with all the new features. Like my Galaxy Nexus, the model itself is, good 2-3 years old, but it has Android 4.2 on it, which a lot of phones that are only a couple months old don't even have. So that's the importance of that. Apparently, talking about that quick announcement about the Galaxy S4 Google Edition, it was shocking that a lot of people, there was kind of a collective gasp when they said the price, that it was $650. And this is something very important that I want to talk about. A lot of people in the United States don't realize that the price of their phone, most people, I think, in America, they wouldn't spend $650 on a phone. They'll spend maybe $200 to $300, but they're not going to spend that. But they don't realize that's what a phone costs. It actually costs like $700 for a really, really great phone. The price of the phone gets subsidized by the 2-year contract that you sign with, say, Sprint or Verizon or AT&T or US Cellular or whoever. So you are still really paying that much for that phone. So for people to be shocked, like, oh my God, how can that cost $650? That shouldn't be a shock, because again, for a really good phone, like the gaming PC of phones, that's what it should cost. So that needs to, in other countries, they don't even worry about that. They'll hash out $600 for a Galaxy Note 2, in a heartbeat, because they know that's just what it costs. So that's a unique problem in the United States for people to realize that. But anyway, that wasn't even that big of an announcement. I mean, it's cool that it exists, but that wasn't like the big deal. Other than that, there was no hardware. Everything was all about software, and there wasn't a whole lot new introduced at Google I/O. But pretty much everything that Google does just instantly became better, which is kind of hard to believe, but it's true. There are a lot of improvements to Google Maps that are just being, as you're listening to this, they're just being released to iOS and Android, and of course on the webpage, to where you can, everything just got really enhanced. So, you can take a look at that, and believe me, you'll instantly see the differences in Google Maps. Google Plus, which of course we are huge fans of on this show. We love Google Plus. That got a lot of improvements, design improvements, kind of where we were talking earlier in the show about Google Now and how it has this card system. One of the big things that happened at Google I/O is that just about every Google product went to this card system, to where it shows little information cards. And that's where Google Plus went to. Instead of having like the scroll up design, they went to like this card design. And now there's, instead of just one row of status updates and posts, it can be like 3 rows. You can change it. You can make it go to 1 if you have a smaller screen. But now it has 3 rows, and it's these cards, and they all kind of move and shift around. And it's just a really, really beautiful design. Google Plus also now, another thing that was announced with that is that across your Google services, be it Google Plus, and Gmail, and I think pretty much maybe even Google Drive. Anyway, across your Google services for free, you get 15 gigs of storage. So like Gmail offered already like close to 7 or 8 gig worth of storage. Now, a lot of people, especially the average person, doesn't get that much email to where they need 8 gig of storage for their email anyway. And usually you just delete it. You can archive everything, but you could archive everything for years if you wanted, with 8 gig of storage. So to be able to use that to store your pictures on Google Plus or whatever else, to have that 15 gig across the board of your Google services, I think is really, really cool. So that was added there. Another thing added was on YouTube. Another thing quick, Google Drive also went to, at least the mobile app, went to the card system too, which I think it looks really, really nice how it has that. But YouTube now, which I do post this show, I make a YouTube video of Sovryn Tech, and there is a Sovryn Tech channel where I put up a lot of documentaries, and a lot of bonus content goes up there that's only on the YouTube channel. And on the YouTube channel, they actually, you can listen, you can change the speed at which the YouTube video plays now. So, if you listen to Sovryn Tech on YouTube, you can actually listen to it like in triple speed. So that way you don't have to sit for an hour and 45 and you can just listen to it, in like maybe an hour or less, which is pretty awesome. So I like that feature. So just all these different, there's also like Google essentially put in almost like a veritable Photoshop into Google Plus for your pictures. Also, they have this thing where it makes an automatic animated GIF of, say, a series of pictures that you take with your phone, because all those normally get instant uploaded privately. So tons of new features got released. Another great thing that I really, really like is the Google Play Music All Access, which is for $9.99, or if you get in and on it before June, it's only $7.99. But for $9.99 a month, you get essentially a Spotify, a Pandora, where you can listen to almost any song you want, over the cloud, and you can listen, and you just type in the search and you play it and you can do it. But then Google Play, now we've talked about Google Play Music before on this show, and I love it. Then it even has where you can still store up to 20,000 of your personal songs. So you got it all. You have a music store. This is better than iTunes now. And it actually is better than any music service out there now. Better in the idea that it has every music feature that every music service offers all in one. It's the first time. It's not really anything new, but it's new in that nobody has as yet combined all these elements together, and Google did it first, and it's working out really well. So you can purchase music if you want to from the Google Play Store. You can upload your personal songs, because there's some songs, like I listen to Stan Bush. You can't get any, maybe a couple songs you can get of new songs you can get of Stan Bush on the Google Play Store, or in any music store for that matter. It's not like Google Play has a lack of selection. They got all the major music dealers for this. So you can, I can upload my Stan Bush collection. I can upload my David Hasselhoff collection, though interestingly, the Google Play Store actually had David Hasselhoff. I'm not kidding. I'm not sarcastic when I say I listen to David Hasselhoff. I really, really do, and I enjoy it. So that was there. So it's a great service, especially if you can jump on it for $7.99 a month. Come on, you have access to, millions and millions of songs, great music. So that was there. And then at the end, Larry Page, the CEO of Google, came out, and he kind of gave, it was a very impressive kind of an inspirational speech. And one thing that a lot of people took away from that, there's a lot of things, but he said that a lot of these rules and regulations and laws are holding technology back. And he talked about how a lot of companies don't want to play ball with each other. They don't want to cooperate, which is what we were talking about earlier in the show. As to where Google will cooperate, but then, and they're not 100% on that, obviously, on cooperation. There's been cases where they haven't cooperated, like with Microsoft, but they ripped on Oracle for not cooperating with them, with open standards and things like that. And so that was interesting for him to, just come out. And from what I understand, I actually, at TerraCoin Conference 2013 in San Jose, I talked to Declan McCullough for a little while. And he pretty much said that Larry Page is not a libertarian by any means. But he made an interesting comment that a lot of libertarians kind of latched onto, especially people that that I know very well, because we're in the Free State Project together. And what it is, he said that it would be nice if we could set aside somewhere, places in the world, where we can experiment, This isn't the island of Dr. Moreau. At least I don't think that's what he had in mind. But we could experiment with technologies or ways of living, that and see how they work out, to see if that actually is better than what we're doing right now. And that was perhaps the most fascinating thing for him to say. Now, see, when he says something like that, that sounds very much like something I'm a participant of, which is the Free State Project, which is the idea of moving 20,000 people, to one area, that being New Hampshire, and achieving liberty in our lifetime, whatever that means. The maximum, like with the Free State Project, it's the statement is the maximum role of government is to protect, life, liberty, and property, or whatever. And So it was almost like, and a lot of people, like the Free State Project site itself actually posted it saying, look, Larry Page is saying, yeah, that what we're doing is what needs to be done right now. We need to be trying other things, and get away from all these rules and regulations or whatever. But again, he's not necessarily very libertarian, so I don't, from what I understand. So I don't know, I don't know what to make of that. But that was an interesting comment. I totally agree with it. I'm a huge fan of intentional communities throughout history, be it Platonopolis, Libertatia, which you may not know of either of those. Those are very, very old examples of intentional communities. Platonopolis never actually got existed because the Roman Senate stopped it from happening, but the emperor wanted it to be so, which was going to be like a city of philosophers. Libertatia was down in southern Africa, was essentially a pirate colony that was anarchic. It was anarchy, like no rules, no no masters. It was really something, but you don't read about that much in the history books. Anyway, Google.io was great. A lot of great products came out and a lot of interesting thoughts, like the thing about Larry Page. If you have thoughts on it, email me at sovereigntech@hush.ai. And this is Brian Sovryn, and I'll see you next week.
This has been Sovryn Tech. Visit us at sovryntech.com. That's SOVRYN tech.com. There you can connect with us, see more of what you've heard on today's show, and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is open source. We encourage you to share. Later, nerds.